everybody will just take it easy, nobody will get hurt.
What happens when Hollywood's most charming leading man tries to order Katharine Hepburn around and gets told to take her home instead? Warren Beatty has been called many things over his decades in Hollywood. A heartthrob, a perfectionist, a master manipulator, a genius director. But one thing he's never been called is easy to work with. Because when Warren Beatty stepped onto a set, it wasn't just to play his part. It was to shape every shot, guide every scene, and make sure the final product matched his vision exactly. From his breakthrough in Splendor and The Grass to the political boldness of Bulworth, Beatty wasn't content to simply stand on his mark. He wanted control over the script, the pacing, the tone, and yes, over his co-stars. Sometimes that control earned him respect. Other times, it sparked the kind of fireworks that Hollywood still talks about decades later. He once famously quipped, "I don't mind if they make me out a bastard, I just don't want them to make me out an idiot." And it's true, Beatty could live with being disliked, so long as he was never outsmarted, outshone, or outmaneuvered. So today, we're taking a tongue-in-cheek tour through 5 actors Warren Beatty hated the most, at least in our satirical version of events. Real clashes, real quotes, and just enough exaggeration to make it Hollywood gold. This is Warren Beatty's top 5 most hated co-stars. Number 5, Katharine Hepburn. Imagine the scene. It's 1994, the set of Love Affair, and 2 Hollywood powerhouses are about to meet. On one side, Warren Beatty, the silver-tongued perfectionist, the man who could sell snow to Eskimos and still have them thanking him for the receipt. On the other, Katharine Hepburn, a living monument to old Hollywood, 4-time Oscar winner, 86 years old, and famously unimpressed by anyone's charm.
If one of us doesn't show, we're not going to pester each other, okay? If you're not there, I'll understand.
Beatty had convinced Hepburn to play a small but significant role in his remake, and everyone expected it to be a gracious, historic moment. The passing of the torch, a respectful nod between 2 cinematic titans. Instead, what the crew got was a masterclass in how 2 colossal personalities can turn a quiet set into the stuff of Hollywood legend. Warren Beatty had a reputation for running his sets with almost obsessive precision. Even when he wasn't the credited director, his fingerprints were everywhere. The lighting, the blocking, the dialogue, even the way someone raised an eyebrow. And he had one golden rule. If it's not perfect, we go again. And again. This, however, was the wrong hill to die on with Katharine Hepburn. The woman had spent decades shaping her own career, fighting studio heads, and carving out her place in a male-dominated industry. She wasn't about to let some younger actor, even one as respected as Beatty, treat her like a first-year ingenue. According to those lucky enough to witness it, the tension boiled over during a seemingly simple scene. Beatty called for yet another take. Hepburn, sitting there in her trademark slacks and exuding that razor-sharp wit, had apparently decided she'd reached her limit. She turned to Warren, fixed him with that unmistakable Hepburn glare, the one that could wither a forest, and delivered the line that would echo through the soundstage for years, "You take me home right now." It wasn't a request, it wasn't even raised in volume. It was calm, icy, and absolute. The kind of tone that made everyone in the room instinctively step back. The crew froze, the cameras stopped rolling. Beatty, a man used to holding the upper hand, stood there momentarily disarmed. Then, he did as he was told. In our satirical retelling, this would be the exact moment Warren scribbled Hepburn's name onto his most hated co-stars list, in thick, underlined ink. Not because he actually disliked her, but because she was one of the rare human beings in Hollywood who could not be out-charmed, out-argued, or outlasted. She called his bluff, and she won. The truth is, Beatty probably admired her more after that exchange. He'd met someone who matched his stubborn streak pound for pound. And Hepburn? She likely went home that day perfectly content, knowing she just reminded everyone on that set, including Warren Beatty, that she was still Katharine Hepburn.
You know that I've never been faithful to anyone in my whole life.
The Love Affair remake itself didn't exactly set the world on fire, but the story of that standoff became far more enduring than the box office numbers. It's one of those whispered on-set legends that never makes it into the press junket interviews but is repeated with a smile at industry dinners years later. And so in our tongue-in-cheek countdown, Hepburn takes the number 5 slot. She didn't just earn Beatty's hate, she earned his respect. And maybe, deep down, he loved the fact that someone could still surprise him, even after decades of playing Hollywood's ultimate puppet master. Number 4, Jack Nicholson, best buddy blow-up on Reds.
To me, you are perfect, and I love you very much.
Picture it, Mulholland Drive in the late 70s. A quiet, winding stretch in the Hollywood Hills, but the neighbors? Not so quiet. Living door to door, you had Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson, and Marlon Brando, a trio so infamous for their antics that locals nicknamed the street Bad Boy Drive. Parties, gossip, and an unspoken contest over who could be the most effortlessly cool. Beatty and Nicholson were friends, the kind who could trade barbs one minute and share a drink the next. But friendship in Hollywood is a delicate thing, especially when one of you is directing the other in an epic Oscar-winning drama. Enter 1981's Reds, Beatty's historical passion project about journalist John Reed and the Russian Revolution. It was ambitious. It was political. It was going to be perfect. And if you know Warren Beatty, you know perfect meant one thing: endless takes until every glance, pause, and syllable was exactly right. For most actors, this could be frustrating. For Jack Nicholson, who was used to slipping into a scene with natural, almost lazy charm, it was downright maddening. His style was to trust the first or second take, to capture that lightning in a bottle spontaneity.
So it was probably the Beverly Wilshire, but Warren Beatty was a good friend.
Beatty's style? Herd the lightning back into the bottle, label it, and demand 3 more variations. The breaking point came during a particularly tense scene. Beatty, perched at the monitor like a general surveying a battlefield, asked for another take, then another, then another. Each time, Nicholson obliged, but the weariness was visible. Finally, on take who knows what, Jack stopped. He turned to Beatty with that trademark arched eyebrow and a look that could slice glass. "Just tell me what the fuckest you want," he snapped, voice cracking not with rage but with pure exhausted exasperation. "And I'll do it." Yes, Jack Nicholson, Hollywood's coolest cucumber, was on the verge of tears. The crew, stunned, glanced between them like they were watching 2 alpha lions circling the same carcass. This was no ordinary disagreement. This was an ego cage match. Beatty didn't yell back. That wasn't his style. He simply gave a half smile as if to say, "Good, I've pushed you to the edge. Now we can work." It was classic Warren, manipulating the moment until he got exactly the raw emotion he wanted. Whether Nicholson realized it or not, Beatty had him right where he wanted him. Of course, in our satirical countdown, this lands Nicholson in the number 4 spot. Best friend turned battlefield casualty. Not because Warren truly hated Jack, but because he was one of the few who dared to talk back, and did it in a way that briefly turned the set into a therapy session with cameras. After Reds wrapped, there was no lasting animosity. In fact, Nicholson later told the story with a laugh, admitting he respected Beatty's obsessive eye, even if it drove him crazy. The film went on to earn 12 Oscar nominations and win 3. Proof that maybe all those extra takes weren't for nothing. Still, imagine the cocktail party small talk years later. "Remember that time you made me cry, Warren?" Nicholson might quip, half joking. Beatty, swirling his drink, would just smirk and say, "You're welcome." Because in Beatty's mind, the ends always justified the means. And if breaking Jack Nicholson's cool for 5 minutes got him the perfect shot, well, it was just another day on Bad Boy Drive. Number 3, Dustin Hoffman, Desert Duel of the Divas.
I am very cut.
Some Hollywood disasters become cult classics. Others become cautionary tales. And then there's Ishtar, a movie so infamous that its title alone can clear a room of studio executives. On paper, Ishtar should have been a hit. 2 of the biggest names of the era, Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman, teaming up in a buddy comedy about clueless lounge singers who stumble into Middle Eastern espionage. Add Oscar-winning director Elaine May and a $50 million budget, huge for the 80s. And you've got a recipe for success or disaster. Spoiler alert, it was the latter. Beatty and Hoffman were friends going into the project. They'd attended the same Hollywood parties, traded industry gossip, and admired each other's work. But friendship doesn't always survive the heat of the Sahara Desert, especially when both men are notorious perfectionists. From day one, there was tension. Beatty, also producing the film, had a vision. Every joke, every beat, every frame exactly the way he pictured it. Hoffman, meanwhile, was an improviser. The kind of actor who liked to explore, experiment, and throw in little surprises on camera. It was like oil and water, and the desert sun wasn't helping. The rivalry really exploded in the editing room. Ishtar had run over budget and way past schedule, and Columbia Pictures was getting antsy. In a rare move, the studio allowed both stars to tinker with the footage separately. That's when the daily ritual began. Hoffman would arrive in the morning, watch the previous night's changes, and mutter, "What did Warren do to my scene?" Then Beatty, working into the night, would look over Hoffman's adjustments and sigh, "Let me see what Dustin did to my scene today." It was a bizarre, passive-aggressive tennis match over every punchline and close-up. Crew members tell stories of the two circling each other like boxers, arguing about whose comedic timing was sharper, whose reaction shots got the bigger laugh, and which one of them looked better in a scene. Director Elaine May, already dealing with location problems and studio pressure, became part referee, part hostage negotiator. Hoffman would sometimes end up playing peacekeeper between May and Beatty, only to resume bickering with Warren minutes later. It wasn't all shouting and sulking, though. Both men were pranksters at heart, and the set saw moments of genuine hilarity. The kind of on-location mischief you only get when two egos as big as their resumes decide to amuse themselves. Still, the underlying tension never went away, and by the time Ishtar limped into theaters in 1987, their friendship had taken a few dents. Critics tore the film apart, audiences stayed away, and it became one of the most notorious flops in Hollywood history. But in our satirical countdown, Hoffman earns the number 3 spot not because of the flop itself, but because of the duel over control, the daily back and forth edits, the tug of war for screen dominance, and the stubborn refusal of either man to give an inch. To Beatty, Hoffman was the witty scene stealer who wouldn't stick to the script. To Hoffman, Beatty was the meddling producer who couldn't resist tweaking someone else's work. And yet, the grudging respect between them never really died. Years later, both men could joke about Ishtar, as if surviving the debacle together had made them war buddies. Still, you can't help but imagine Beatty in this playful most hated list, smirking as he places Hoffman right in the middle. Not because he truly disliked him, but because in that sweltering desert for one long expensive shoot, Dustin Hoffman was the only man in Hollywood who could match Warren Beatty ego for ego, and live to tell the tale. Number 2, Marlon Brando, Clash of the Titans, Ego Edition.
Gosh, I had something to say, and I can't remember what I was going to say for the life of me.
Some Hollywood rivalries are loud, messy, and splashed across tabloids. Others are silent battles fought behind closed doors. Or in this case, behind the locked gates of multi-million-dollar mansions on Mulholland Drive. Warren Beatty and Marlon Brando never co-starred in a major film together, but they didn't need to. They lived just doors apart in the 1970s, on a stretch of road cheekily nicknamed Bad Boy Drive, for housing 3 of Hollywood's most notorious charmers, Beatty, Brando, and Jack Nicholson. Imagine that block party. Beatty idolized Brando in his early career. The young Warren studied a streetcar named Desire like it was sacred scripture. Brando's raw, instinctive style was everything Beatty wanted to be, until they actually got to know each other. That's when admiration turned into something more complicated. By the time Beatty and Brando were mingling in the same elite circles, Brando had long abandoned the idea of meticulous preparation. He was the king of winging it, showing up to set with minimal rehearsal, sometimes with lines fed to him through an earpiece. It drove serious actors and obsessive directors insane. Beatty, on the other hand, was the definition of meticulous. He could rehearse a scene 40 times before cameras rolled, adjusting every detail until it matched the vision in his head. This approach clashed hard with Brando's philosophy of just feel it and let it happen. According to Hollywood insiders, Brando once referred to Beatty's style as soulless, implying that all Warren's polishing and tweaking sucked the life out of a scene. It was an insult that cut deep, especially coming from a man Beatty once considered untouchable. Beatty, never one to confront someone head-on unless cameras were rolling, reportedly got his revenge in quieter ways. There are whispers that when Brando floated ideas for a project they'd discussed, Warren forgot to pass them along or found ways to cut them out of the conversation. Their tension wasn't explosive, but it was palpable. Industry events where both men appeared were marked by polite, surface-level conversation, but underneath, there was a game of subtle one-upmanship. Brando might tell a story about improvising an entire scene. Beatty would counter with an anecdote about winning an Oscar for a performance he'd meticulously crafted. Brando would boast about doing something in one take. Beatty would smirk and suggest that maybe a second take could have made it better. One oft-repeated story paints the picture perfectly. A young entertainment reporter once rode with Beatty past Brando's estate. The journalist, eager to stir some gossip, pointed toward Brando's property. Beatty smiled faintly and said, "Marlon, one of the greats," in a tone so neutral you couldn't tell if it was genuine praise or the driest burn in Hollywood history. In our satirical countdown, Brando lands at number 2 not because of screaming matches or public scandals, but because he was the one man Beatty could never fully charm, outmaneuver, or control. Beatty thrived on being the smartest, most prepared man in the room, and Brando's genius was the opposite. He could stroll in late, barely knowing his lines, and still steal the spotlight. It was maddening for Warren. Brando broke every rule Beatty lived by, and yet the results were undeniable. Audiences worshipped him, critics forgave him, and his myth only grew with every unpredictable performance. If Beatty ever did hate Brando, it was the kind of hate laced with grudging admiration. The frustration of watching someone succeed without playing the game, when you've been playing it at master level your whole career.
Hey, Stella!
In Hollywood terms, it was less a feud and more a cold war between two superpowers, each convinced their way was the only way. And in that war, there were no peace treaties. Just the occasional nod across the driveway, and the knowledge that for all his charm and control, Warren Beatty could never quite conquer Marlon Brando. Number 1, Robert Redford, the eternal rival.
My friend, because it doesn't get any easier.
If Warren Beatty's life were a Hollywood Western, Robert Redford would be the rival gunslinger forever lurking just across the dusty main street, always ready to outdraw him in front of the crowd. Their feud wasn't built on screaming matches or on-set meltdowns. No, this was a decades-long, slow-burn rivalry, the kind that played out in casting rooms, gossip columns, and box office charts. It began in the late 60s, when both men were rising stars. Handsome, charming, and dangerous in that way only movie idols can be. To the casual moviegoer, they seemed like two sides of the same Hollywood coin. To Warren Beatty, that was the problem. Beatty prided himself on having an unshakable eye for scripts. He was the guy who could sniff out a hit before anyone else, or so he thought. Unfortunately, the universe had other plans. More than once, a script Beatty turned down ended up in Redford's lap, and became a blockbuster. Case in point, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Beatty had first crack at it. He passed. Redford took the role, turned Sundance into an icon, and cemented himself as a leading man for the ages. The same thing happened years later with Indecent Proposal. Beatty turned his nose up at the script. Redford accepted it and raked in the box office cash. Friends have said the quickest way to make Warren bristle at a dinner party was to mention that Redford got to a script first. It wasn't that Beatty disliked Redford personally. It's that Redford was living Warren's what could have been scenarios in real time. Their rivalry reached a glorious peak in 1998, when Beatty's political satire Bulworth opened the same weekend as Redford's sweeping romantic drama The Horse Whisperer. Studio executives quietly suggested Beatty might want to move his film to avoid the clash. Beatty refused. According to one friend, Warren was even spotted visiting theaters on opening weekend, casually checking which line was longer, his or Redford's. Spoiler alert, Redford won that particular round.
Shoot it all in one day, live, on the air, everybody running around in a constant state of panic. You remember how it was in the radio.
The Horse Whisperer dominated the box office. But here's the thing about Warren Beatty. He has a gift for reframing any loss as a moral victory. To this day, you can imagine him saying, well, the right people saw Bulworth. And yet, the rivalry wasn't entirely about competition. There was also the sting of similarity. Both men weren't just actors. They were directors, producers, political activists, and symbols of Hollywood glamour. They both aged into elder statesmen of the industry, each with a resume full of critical darlings and commercial hits. They even had similar public images, intelligent, principled, and, let's be honest, almost unfairly photogenic. In our satirical countdown, Redford takes the crown as Beatty's most hated co-star, not because of bitter personal animosity, but because he represented everything Warren Beatty valued in someone else. Redford was like the mirror Beatty didn't always want to look into, a reflection of what he could have been or perhaps feared he wasn't. There's a delicious irony here. Redford has always been described as easygoing, modest, and utterly unbothered by competition. Beatty, meanwhile, was known for keeping score in box office numbers, critical praise, and Hollywood influence. It's possible that Redford never once considered Warren his rival, which might have been the ultimate insult. Still, in true Hollywood fashion, both men maintained a surface-level cordiality. They could smile for the cameras at industry events, pose together at charity galas, and give glowing, if slightly barbed quotes about each other to the press. But behind those smiles, Beatty's inner monologue was probably ticking like a stopwatch. How long until my next win? So Redford sits at number 1 on this list. The elegant, sun-kissed cowboy who kept riding off with the roles, the praise, and on at least one memorable weekend, the longer ticket line. And if you asked Warren Beatty about it over a martini, he might lean in, smile that charming movie star smile and say, I don't hate Robert, I just like winning more than he does. And there you have it. 5 grudges from the sly, smirking mind of Warren Beatty. Or at least from our satirical imagination. In truth, Beatty's blend of charm, calculation, and ego made him as many lifelong friends as rivals. But a Legends myth is never complete without a few tall tales of on-set showdowns and box office duels. So picture him now, in a plush Beverly Hills screening room, sipping something expensive, keeping score in his head. He might deny hating anyone, but deep down, Warren knows every legend needs a list. And his, it's pure Hollywood gold.